We have Yo Pafo Awamensa, who is a PhD candidate from Edith Coward University. And he is going to tell us about the ecological impact of climate change and heat waves on fish resources. A review of evidence to guide the development of a scalable predictive modeling framework for adaptive management along the Western Australian coastline. So welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's quite a mouthful, right? All right. So good morning, everyone. It's been quite an exciting few days, and I'm happy to be here to talk to you about my project that is currently ongoing at ICU. I'm only just starting, so I'll be very happy to hear what your thoughts are on, especially with the modeling aspect of things, and some of the potential challenges that I can face with the project. So for context, our world is changing. Our climate situation is getting worse over the years, and these has sort of triggered extreme events over the years, like flooding, fire outbreaks, marine heat waves, droughts, and the like. So it has sort of encouraged organizations to collaborate and find solutions to some of these issues. So one of these collaborations is the one currently ongoing here in Western Australia. It's being sponsored by the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, and they're collaborating with the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science to try and understand the heat wave situation, marine heat wave situation here in Australia, Western Australia, and the impact that it is having on marine ecosystems and the impact like currently and the impact that it's going to have on these ecosystems in the future. So this is where my PhD project sits. So we are currently trying to understand the ecological impacts of these marine heat waves on fish resources here in Western Australia and to make predictions of these impacts into the future. And this is what I'll be doing for the next 3.5 years of my life. Yeah, exciting. So marine heat waves. So these are like extreme temperature events that occur in our marine areas. And for Western Australia, it has happened a couple of times over the years. And as you can see from the diagram on your screens, for the top right corner, you can see the 1999 heat wave, which was a little bit longer than the rest of them for several months, as compared to the 2011 heat wave, which was for a shorter period, but it was extremely intense, very intense. It's one of the biggest heat wave events that has occurred not only in Western Australia, but around the world, actually. So it was really big. And there's been a couple of other heat wave events as well, the 2012 heat wave event and the 2015 heat wave events. These have not received a lot of attention. I don't know why, but yeah. So due to its effects, loads of studies have, concentrated on understanding the impacts of these heat waves to sort of help with the management decisions and stuff like that. But there's still a lot of things that needs to be done. So for instance, we are hoping to look at a longer time series period that involves several marine heat wave events and sort of understand how each of these heat wave events affect the fish species like over the years. And so whilst we are doing that, we'll be able to understand the cumulative impact of these events over the years as well, and hopefully make some predictions for the future. In order to do this, we are forming a partnership with the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development to select some of these case studies to form the basis of the PhD project. So it's almost obvious that these species are going to exhibit different characteristics, especially with the way they move, and especially with how they would respond to marine heat wave events. So for instance, the crabs and the scallops and the prawns in the Shark Bay invertebrate resource area are relatively sedentary. It's like they don't really move around a lot. So they are more or less confined to a restricted area. And for instance, the mackerel managed fishery for mackerels, they are pelagic species and they move around a lot. So for species that move around a lot and for species that do not really move around a lot, they're going to respond very differently to marine heat waves. So these are some of the things that we're having a look at, and these are some of the problems that we seek to solve for the modeling approach of the work. And in doing that, we'll be working with these kind of data sets. For the habitat data, I think it's more or less the ecological environment of the species that we're working with. And the climate data is pretty straightforward for our case. We'll be looking at the temperature over the period of time that we'll be having to model. And that will mainly be the sea surface temperature. We'll try and have other look at other proxies as well, but currently just mainly the sea surface temperature. And there will also be the biological data, looking at the age, the weight, the population structure, the reproductive data, and all of those kind of data sets for that one as well. And the fisheries data, which will be mainly the catch data for the number of fishes that are caught at a particular time, or the weight of the fish that are caught at a particular time. And then the effort data as well, which is like the number of trips that a fishermen make out on sea to collect these, to sort of catch these species, the gears that they use, and then, the number of times they actually make those, the duration, the days or the hours that they spend out on sea. So these are some of the data sets that we're using, and one of the major challenges of the project is integrating all of these different data sets into a single modeling framework so that, well, in such a way that we don't lose a lot of information. So these data sets are collected over different scales, very different scales. Some are collected seasonally, others are collected monthly, daily, so they are very different. So the bigger challenge is to try to get all of them together in a single framework and, understand how they are affected by marine heat waves. So I'll be very happy to hear what your thoughts are on some of the approaches that we could employ to navigate some of these problems. The other issue that we are, having a look at is some of these species. So for instance, for the pelagic species, they move around a lot, and the Western Australian coastline has been divided into several management areas. So each management areas have, different ways of collecting data on these species. And that also be another challenge, having to integrate those different data sets that are specific to those management areas into the framework. So again, I'm very happy to hear what your thoughts are on some of these issues. But then that notwithstanding, we've have a look at some of the potential models that we can use for this project. And I'll just run you through that very shortly. The first group is the classical regression models. They are great. I mean, they have their advantages and disadvantages, but they will be like a great way of providing a baseline understanding of the relationships or the responses of these species to the marine heat wave events. The second class or group of modeling approaches that we are looking at is the spatiotemporal and hierarchical models, mainly because of the ability to integrate a lot of different data sets at different hierarchies as well. And then the last group is the machine learning algorithms for their predictive capabilities, of course. So I want to say that this is not like a restricted list. This is not like all the models that we're going to use. We're just having a look at them as potential candidates for the projects that we are working on. So we understand the situation is very serious, and there is a potential for it to cause serious problems for our resources in the ocean, which a lot of people depend on, and a lot of economies depend on as well. So finding solutions to the heat wave problem is a very important step to take. And we believe that integrating all of these data sets into a single modeling framework will be very important to providing insights into the dynamics of the heat wave events here in Western Australia. And the predictive aspect of the project will also help provide a more proactive, management approach to all of these things instead of just being reactionary to it. Yeah. And the last thing is to, develop or help build a more sustainable fisheries management here in Western Australia, because the heat waves are going to get worse. I hope not, but it looks like it's going to get worse. So we need to be ready for it. So I'd like to see a big thank you to the sponsoring organizations and the participating universities and institutions as well. They are doing a very great job in this project. And I will also want to thank my supervisors. They've been great as well. And for this platform to share or tell the story of my project. I want to add that I'm only just starting this project, and I'm actually just developing my proposal 3 months into it. So I'll be very happy to hear what your thoughts are on some of the things that I can do, especially with the methodologies, some of the modeling that I can adapt to find, sustainable solutions to the heat wave events here in Western Australia. That's my email. You can just reach out and you can have a good chat. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Hi everyone. I'm Fiona McManus. I'm a physiotherapist turned biostatistician at the University of Melbourne. And I work at the Methods and Implementation Support for Clinical and Health Research Hub, or MISH for short. And I'll be talking to you today about my experiences consulting for a large research team. Now, I have been told I talk a lot, but you'll be happy to hear that I mistakenly prepared a 5-minute presentation for my 10-minute slot. So I've really got no excuse if I go over time. Right, so I mentioned I was a physiotherapist. I've worked at various public and private hospitals around Melbourne. I've worked in private practice, and I've even worked as a physio research assistant. So I would screen participants over the phone. I would assess participants in the lab. I'd enter data manually into Excel. And it's a small world because that was for the team that I now work for as a biostatistician. And that is this team, which is the Centre for Health, Exercise and Sports Medicine at the University of Melbourne, or CHESM for short. And I've worked for them since I graduated from a Masters of Biostatistics several years ago. So I was initially employed as the sole biostatistician, at the time consulting for this team, which you can see has over 20 researchers. They're from multiple clinical disciplines, mostly physios, podiatry, exercise science, human movement, so on. And so basically any and all requests for stat support came to me. So that covered everything from assisting with the design of research projects and protocols, performing analyses, interpreting results, reviewing manuscripts for publication, just general statistical queries, the works. So one of the major challenges was and still is, the sheer number of studies that the team had in various phases. There were study designs being developed, data collection would be almost complete for other studies, and there were also manuscripts being drafted for publication. And I really had no idea what the priorities were. Team members were unaware of what other team members were asking of me. And most communication with the director, deputy, and really any team members was via email. So there were no regular meetings. And I started working in 2021, so I started working from home. So being a clinician, we love Excel files. So I started an Excel file to keep track of all the studies. Short name, research question, who the lead investigators were, what tasks had been completed and what needed to be completed and when, where study documents were saved, how much of a priority the study was, status of publications, just lots of details. And this was useful not just for keeping track of the studies, but also for performance reviews with my supervisor, keeping my resume up to date, going for promotion, reporting back to our manager in MISH so that the annual report could be completed, just lots of uses. And then another solution implemented was starting these monthly meetings between myself, my supervisor, the director and deputy. And so we would review all the studies in the list, we set priorities and plan ahead for those times when everything just seemed to be a priority. And this was really great because it really took the pressure off and still takes the pressure off me, because the director and deputy can see my to-do list, and they can see that if I'm working on one task for them, then those other tasks will have to wait. And thankfully, this was also useful for justifying more biostatistical support. So when that number of studies increased, which it has over time, and so then what we did is amongst the group of biostatisticians that were now working for CHESM, we now started weekly meetings between ourselves. And that's for us to go through and check in with each other as to what studies we've all got on our list that week, and delegate any new studies amongst ourselves. And then what we do is we send an email every Monday morning to the director and deputy with our biostatistics priorities for that week outlined. And this is great because it allows CHESM to quickly confirm that our priorities align with theirs, and it just keeps them in the loop so that they can see how busy we are. Now, another challenge working for a large team, all clinical researchers, no statisticians, is that the same issues just arise again and again. So it might be researchers inferring from pre-post changes, which we know is biased because of regression to the mean or placebo effects, or they might have multiple secondary outcomes or dependent variables, and or many exploratory analyses, which we know also has issues. So I found a helpful solution to this has been presentations to the research team, and this is obviously on the topic of the recurring issue. And I'll present these live, and I'll really try to allow lots of question time. So I find this extremely useful for clinician researchers to be able to address those questions in a timely manner, and really important feedback for myself, as depending on how the question that the researcher proposes to me is phrased, or even whether I get any questions at all, it gives me great insight into how well I've been able to explain a statistical concept in a way that the researcher can understand. And it helps me refine the way that I explain concepts in the future. So, these presentations are recorded, and we send them to the team. So not only can researchers watch if they weren't able to get to the live presentation, but when the issue arises again, as it inevitably does, I can refer researchers back to the presentation and save myself a lot of time going back through the same issue. So another challenge that arises are these requests for the same or similar task over and over. And in my position, an example in my team is I work with, we do a lot of randomized controlled trials with repeated measures over time. And so, yeah, the first I usually hear about a new study is a request for another sample size estimation. And being able to automate a response and reports for these requests has been a massive time saver. So with sample size requests for trials with repeated measures, we usually justify assumptions based on previous studies. And so what I've done is collect together those standard deviations and intercluster correlations into a single location for quick reference. And of course, it's been super efficient to have code that details assumptions and calculates sample sizes, you know, and helps me quickly report these assumptions and estimates to the team in a form that they're familiar with and that they can understand and keep a record of. Last, in this applied role, it's hard to find time to develop my own stat skills. But one strategy I did find particularly useful has been incorporating my own learning with the work I do for the team. So an example was last year, a journal reviewer requested further details on interpreting the results for sensitivity analysis. So I searched the literature. It was a great opportunity to take a bit of time to do that. I wasn't able to find a previous study that had applied a technique described in the literature. So I applied this technique. The journal reviewer was satisfied, the study was published, and I presented how I applied the technique at the Australian Stat Conference last year. So having been in this role for a few years, what I think has been helpful, and I think is in brackets, because now I'm going to do exactly what I've been complaining clinical researchers do, and I'm going to infer from pre-post changes. But what I think has been helpful is taking time to reflect on what is working well and what could be improved. So kind of diagnosing problems, as a physio would say, or analysing data in stats talk. And then those regular meetings with the research team. So meetings with agendas, presentations, etc. It's really helped clarify responsibilities and timelines, allow the team and I to develop trust and rapport, exchange feedback, and really take the pressure off myself working in isolation of the rest of the research team. That's it. Thank you.